On a quiet morning, a police officer stopped a woman for simply jogging in a park. He saw her as a threat, not knowing that she was actually a highly trained FBI agent. Moments later, he would make the biggest mistake of his career. How will she respond? Will she let this injustice slide? Or will she fight back and expose the abuse of power? Stay tuned to find out. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Blast off. The sun had barely risen over Zilker Park in Austin, Texas, casting a golden glow over the jogging trail. The morning air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of dew-covered grass. Maya Collins, a seasoned FBI special agent, tied her sneakers and took a deep breath before starting her daily run. This was her ritual, her moment of solitude before diving into the chaos of federal investigations. As she found her rhythm, she noticed something odd. The usual friendly nods from other joggers felt different. Some looked at her and quickly turned away, while others whispered to each other. She brushed it off. She was used to standing out, a black woman in a high-profile law enforcement career. Just as she rounded a curve near the park's lake, a sharp voice cut through the morning calm. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Maya slowed down, her heart steady but her instincts sharp. A burly police officer in a stiff uniform stomped toward her, sunglasses low on his nose, his hand resting on his belt. Officer Jake Callahan. "Can I help you, officer?" Maya asked, her voice calm but firm. "You got ID on you?" he demanded, looking her up and down. Maya frowned. "ID? I'm just jogging like everyone else." "Yeah?" Callahan scoffed. "We've had reports of suspicious activity, and you fit the description." Maya's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what that meant. She met his gaze, unwavering. Suspicious, or just existing while black? The air between them grew heavy. A few joggers slowed down to watch, sensing the tension. Maya had seen this before, but this time, Callahan had no idea who he was dealing with. Maya stood her ground, her sharp gaze locked onto Officer Callahan. The way he scrutinized her, as if she were some kind of threat, was infuriating. She had dealt with men like him before, the type who saw her skin color before they saw her humanity. "Let's try this again," Callahan said, stepping closer. "I asked for your ID. I suggest you hand it over, unless you want to make this harder on yourself." Maya took a controlled breath. "I don't have to carry ID to jog in a public park," she said evenly. "Is there a reason you're only stopping me?" Callahan let out a scoff, his stance widening. "Don't get smart with me, lady. Either you show me some identification, or I'll have to assume you're hiding something." A few people had stopped along the trail now, watching cautiously. Some had their phones out, subtly recording. Maya could feel the weight of their eyes, the unspoken fear in their hesitation. She pulled out her phone. Then, "I'll be recording this, thanks," she said. That was the breaking point. In a swift motion, Callahan's hand shot out, knocking the phone from her grasp. It hit the pavement hard, the screen cracking upon impact. Maya's pulse surged. That was an assault. "You think you can do whatever you want, huh?" Callahan sneered. "You think you can just—" Before he could finish, Maya moved. With the reflexes of someone trained in hand-to-hand combat, she sidestepped his attempt to grab her and swept her arm upward, blocking his next move. He stumbled slightly, his balance momentarily thrown off. "Excuse me?" Maya said, voice cold as steel. Callahan's face twisted with pure rage and humiliation. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a black woman who refused to shrink under his authority. "You're resisting arrest," he barked, reaching for his cuffs. "For what?" Maya shot back. Running while black? Or for not letting you put your hands on me? The tension was suffocating now. More people had gathered. Someone whispered, "She didn't do anything." Another muttered, "He knocked her phone down first." Maya saw a young woman holding up her phone, recording everything. "You're making a mistake," Maya warned, her voice unwavering. "And I promise you, you're not walking away from this one." Callahan didn't like being outnumbered or outmaneuvered. His pride was on the line, and he had no idea how deep of a hole he was digging. "Turn around and put your hands where I can see them," he ordered, his hand twitching toward his baton. Maya stared him down, her expression calm. Then, in one deliberate movement, she reached into her jacket and pulled out her badge. The golden FBI insignia glinted under the morning sun. Callahan's face drained of color. Maya took a step forward. "No, officer," she said coolly. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." For a split second, the world seemed to stand still. The golden FBI badge in Maya's hand shimmered under the sunlight, and the crowd, already on edge, collectively gasped. Officer Callahan froze, his eyes flicking between the badge and Maya's face, his mind scrambling to process what just happened. "You're lying," Callahan muttered, his voice weaker now. Maya raised an eyebrow, her grip on the badge firm. "Try me," she said. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Just a moment ago, Callahan had been the one in control, barking orders, puffing up his chest. But now, his authority was crumbling right in front of him. "You're an FBI agent?" he finally choked out, his face going from red to ghostly pale. Maya took a slow, deliberate step forward, making sure the crowd saw everything. "That's right," she said. "And you just assaulted a federal officer, knocked my phone to the ground, attempted to detain me without cause, and let's not forget, you kicked me." Her voice was ice cold, but controlled. Callahan's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. "You see this?" Maya turned slightly to address the bystanders. "This is what happens when power goes unchecked, when certain officers think they can abuse their authority without consequences." Callahan snapped back into defense mode, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "Look, this was just a misunderstanding. I thought you were someone else." Maya narrowed her eyes. "Really? Because you seemed pretty sure a minute ago." A woman holding her phone stepped closer. "I got everything on video," she said, voice firm. "Every single word." Callahan looked sick. He glanced around, realizing the weight of what he'd done, and how much evidence was now stacked against him. Maya didn't let up. "Call your supervisor," she ordered, her voice authoritative, unshaken. Callahan hesitated. "Now," she added. He fumbled for his radio, his hand shaking slightly. "Dispatch, I need a supervisor at Zilker Park. Now." Maya crossed her arms, watching him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The moment Callahan radioed for his supervisor, Maya knew she had won. But the fight wasn't over yet. The crowd was no longer just watching. People were openly voicing their outrage, their whispers turning into full-blown condemnation. "This is exactly why we don't trust cops like him," someone muttered. Another voice chimed in. "She's an FBI agent, and he still thought he could get away with it? Imagine if she wasn't." Callahan stood stiff, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he might break a tooth. He wouldn't meet Maya's gaze. The weight of his mistake was crushing him. A few minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, and Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, Callahan's superior, stepped out. He was a no-nonsense officer, mid-50s, with a reputation for doing things by the book. He took one look at the scene, Maya standing firm, Callahan looking pale, the crowd still filming, and instantly knew this was bad. "Collins," Reynolds said, eyes narrowing as he recognized her. "Lieutenant," Maya greeted, voice measured but icy. "We have a problem." Reynolds exhaled, his expression grim. "I can see that." He turned to Callahan. "What the hell happened here?" Callahan swallowed hard. "Sir, She was acting suspicious. "I asked for ID. She refused. She resisted." Maya let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "That's an interesting version of events. The truth is, he saw a black woman jogging and decided I didn't belong here. When I questioned him, he knocked my phone to the ground, physically assaulted me, and tried to arrest me without cause." Reynolds rubbed his temples, clearly trying to control his frustration. "And you didn't recognize her as a federal agent?" I didn't know," Callahan stammered. "She didn't say." "I didn't have to," Maya cut in. "I was doing nothing wrong." One of the bystanders stepped forward, holding her phone up. "I got the whole thing recorded," she said. "Do you want to see your officer in action?" Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Send it to me," he said, voice tight. He turned back to Callahan. "Hand over your badge and weapon, now." Callahan froze. "Sir, Now," Reynolds barked. With shaking hands, Callahan unclipped his badge, placing it in his superior's hand, followed by his gun. He looked defeated, like the reality of the situation had just slammed into him like a freight train. "This isn't over," Reynolds told Maya. "He's going on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation." "Good," Maya said, "because I'm filing a formal complaint. And trust me, this won't get buried." Reynolds nodded. "Understood." As Callahan stood there, stripped of everything that made him feel powerful, Maya looked him dead in the eye. "You thought you were untouchable," she said. "Now, you know you're not." Days later, the incident had exploded nationwide. Footage of the confrontation had gone viral, sparking debates about racial profiling and police accountability. News anchors dissected every second of the video, while activists demanded policy reforms. Meanwhile, Officer Callahan's career was over. After an internal investigation, the Austin Police Department terminated him, citing excessive force and misconduct. He now faced potential criminal charges, his once assumed power completely shattered. Maya, however, wasn't celebrating. Justice wasn't just about removing one bad officer. It was about changing the system that allowed officers like Callahan to thrive for so long. One morning, she returned to Zilker Park, the same jogging trail, the same crisp air. But this time, something felt different. As she laced up her sneakers, an older black man approached her, his eyes filled with warmth. "Excuse me," he said. "You're Agent Collins, right?" Maya hesitated before nodding. The man smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did, standing up to that cop, that wasn't just for you. It was for all of us." Maya's chest tightened. She had spent her career fighting injustice in courtrooms. But this was real change. "Thank you," she said softly. As she jogged down the familiar path, she no longer felt like an outsider. She belonged here. She always had. And now, so did every other black person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't. This story is more than just a confrontation. It's a lesson on power, accountability, and standing up for what's right. It highlights how racial bias still exists in law enforcement and how important it is to document and challenge injustices when they happen. One major takeaway is the power of awareness and evidence. If Maya hadn't stood her ground, or if bystanders hadn't recorded the incident, Callahan might have walked away without consequences. This reminds us that staying silent allows injustice to thrive. If you ever witness misconduct, speak up, record, and report it. Another lesson is knowing your rights. Whether you're being stopped unfairly or witnessing discrimination, understanding your legal protections can prevent abuse of power. Maya knew her rights, and that knowledge turned the situation around. Finally, this story emphasizes that real change happens when people demand it. One person standing up may seem small, but when communities unite, policies shift and systemic reform becomes possible. The next time you see an injustice, ask yourself, will I be a silent bystander, or will I take action? Because change doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people refuse to accept the status quo. Today's story isn't just about one woman standing up to injustice. It's about all of us and how we respond when faced with discrimination. Maya chose to fight back, using her knowledge, authority, and resilience to turn the tables. But what if it were you in that situation? Would you thoughts? 1. Stand your ground, demand accountability, and ensure justice is served. 2. Avoid confrontation, comply to de-escalate, and report it later. There's no easy answer, and every choice comes with its own risks. What would you do? Comment 1 or 2 below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support more thought-provoking content. Together, we can keep these important conversations going. Blast off with